Somewhere off the coast of Colombia, 600 meters below the surface of the Caribbean Sea, there is a shipwreck holding more gold, silver, and emeralds than any treasure ever recovered in human history. An estimated $17 billion in today's money, sitting untouched on the ocean floor for over 300 years. That ship is the San José, a Spanish galleon that sank in 1708 while fleeing an English warship, taking with it not just a king's ransom in precious metal, but the bones of 600 men, the fingerprints of an empire, and a legal war that is still raging today between nations, treasure hunters, and an indigenous people demanding their stolen history back. This is not just a story about gold, it's a story about greed, blood, and a secret the ocean has refused to give up. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you'll understand why some people believe this ship should never be raised at all. Let's go back to where it all began, because to understand why the San José matters so much, you have to understand what Spain was fighting for in the first place. In the early 1700s, Europe was tearing itself apart in a conflict known as the War of the Spanish Succession. The Spanish throne was empty, and every major power on the continent, France, England, Austria, the Dutch Republic, wanted their candidate sitting on it. Spain itself was nearly bankrupt. Decades of war, mismanagement, and overextension had drained the royal treasury to almost nothing. And yet, Spain still had one thing no other European power could match: an empire in the Americas overflowing with silver and gold. Every year, ships from the colonies would gather in Cartagena, on the coast of what is now Colombia, loaded with the wealth of an entire continent, silver mined by forced indigenous labor in the mountains of Potosí, in modern-day Bolivia, gold pulled from the rivers of New Granada, and emeralds so pure they were considered among the finest in the world. This wealth was gathered into a convoy called the Tierra Firme fleet, and it would sail back across the Atlantic to fund the Spanish war effort. Without that fleet, Spain could not pay its soldiers, could not bribe its allies, and could not survive the war. The entire fate of an empire depended on a handful of wooden ships making it safely across an ocean. At the head of that fleet, in the year 1708, sailed the San José. She was not just any galleon. The San José was the pride of the Spanish Navy, a 64-gun warship built to both carry treasure and defend it. She was massive for her time, well over 1,000 tons, with 3 decks bristling with cannons and a crew of nearly 600 men. She had been custom-built for exactly this purpose: to be nearly impossible to sink and nearly impossible to capture. Spain was betting almost everything on this single ship, and into her hold went one of the largest treasure cargoes ever assembled. Historians estimate she was carrying somewhere between 3 and 11 million pesos in gold and silver coins, along with uncut emeralds and other precious goods gathered from across the Spanish colonies. To put that in perspective, using modern valuations, experts today estimate the total worth of everything aboard the San José at somewhere between $4 and $20 billion, and some of the more generous estimates, factoring in the historical and archaeological value of the coins themselves, push that number even higher. No shipwreck ever found, before or since, has come close to matching it. Not the Titanic, not the Lusitania, not even the legendary Spanish treasure fleets lost in Florida's hurricanes. The San José remains, by a wide margin, the richest shipwreck in human history. But wealth like that does not travel unnoticed. England knew exactly what that fleet was carrying, and knew exactly what it would mean for the war if that gold reached Spain. So the Royal Navy sent a squadron to intercept it, commanded by a commodore named Charles Wager. On the 8th of June 1708, off the coast of Peru, near Cartagena, Wager's ships caught up with the Spanish fleet. What followed became known as the Battle of Baru, and it would last only a few hours. But those few hours would decide the fate of the greatest treasure in maritime history. Accounts from the period describe a chaotic, violent engagement. As dusk fell, Wager's flagship, the HMS Expedition, closed in on the San José and opened fire at close range. The Spanish galleon fought back fiercely. This was, after all, a warship built for exactly this moment. Cannon fire tore across the water in the fading light, and then, according to eyewitness accounts from English sailors watching from nearby ships, something went catastrophically wrong aboard the San José. There was an explosion. Historians still debate the exact cause. The most widely accepted theory is that a stray spark, or a direct hit from an English cannonball, reached the ship's gunpowder stores, the magazine deep in her hull where hundreds of barrels of black powder were kept for her own guns. In an instant, the San José was torn apart from the inside. English witnesses described watching the galleon simply vanish in a wall of fire and smoke, breaking into pieces as she went down. The entire event, from full engagement to the ship disappearing beneath the waves, is believed to have taken only minutes. Of the nearly 600 men aboard, it is estimated that no more than a handful survived. Almost the entire crew, sailors, soldiers, officers, and likely enslaved laborers pressed into service, went down with the ship. In a matter of moments, one of the richest cargoes ever assembled and hundreds of human lives disappeared into 600 meters of dark Caribbean water and stayed there, untouched, unseen, for nearly 300 years. Now, here's where the story shifts from a battle at sea to something even stranger, because the San José didn't just disappear, it became a legend, and legends attract hunters. For centuries, treasure seekers searched the waters off Cartagena for any trace of the wreck. Spanish records gave a general location, but the Caribbean seafloor in that region is vast, and technology for centuries simply wasn't capable of locating, let alone reaching, a wreck at those depths. The San José became something of a maritime holy grail, talked about, dreamed about, but never found. That changed in the 1980s, when an American salvage company called Sea Search Armada claimed to have located the wreck using sonar technology and reported the coordinates to the Colombian government, expecting to split the recovered treasure. What followed was decades of legal battles between Sea Search Armada and the Colombian state, with Colombia eventually passing laws asserting that any shipwreck found in its territorial waters and anything of cultural heritage belonged to the nation, cutting the salvage company's claimed share down dramatically. The case dragged through Colombian and even American courts for over 30 years. And then, in 2015, everything changed again. The Colombian government announced that a joint operation involving Colombian authorities and an international team of maritime archaeologists, using an autonomous underwater vehicle called Remous 6000, the same class of robotic submersible that helped locate the wreck of Air France Flight 447, had found the true resting place of the San José. Video footage released afterward showed the seafloor scattered with bronze cannons engraved with dolphins, a signature detail that helped confirm the ship's identity, along with piles of ceramic jars and what appeared to be scattered gold coins glinting in the submersible's lights. For the first time in 3 centuries, the world was looking directly at the richest shipwreck ever lost. But finding the ship did not end the mystery. If anything, it opened up a much bigger one. Because the moment the San José was confirmed found, the question stopped being, where is it, and became, who does it belong to? And that question turned out to be far more complicated and far more explosive than anyone expected. Before we go further into the legal battle still raging over this treasure today, if you're enjoying uncovering mysteries like this one, take a second to hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next hidden story we dig up together. And I'd genuinely love to know, if you had discovered a treasure like the San José, would you want it raised and displayed in a museum for the world to see, or left exactly where it rests, untouched, as a grave for the men who went down with it? Let me know what you choose in the comments, because as you're about to hear, that's the exact question the whole world is fighting over right now. Let's pick up where we left off, because the ownership dispute over the San José might be even stranger than the sinking itself. Colombia claims the wreck lies in its territorial waters and considers it a piece of national heritage, arguing the treasure should stay in the country and be displayed to educate the public about Colombia's colonial history. Spain, on the other hand, argues that the San José was a Spanish naval vessel, flying the Spanish flag on a Spanish military mission, and under international maritime law, sunken state vessels typically remain the property of their nation of origin, regardless of where they're found, meaning Spain believes the treasure legally still belongs to them. Then there's Sea Search Armada, the original American-based salvage company, still fighting in court for a share of the find they say they located first, decades before Colombia's official rediscovery. And that's still not the full picture, because there is a fourth claimant, and their argument may be the most powerful of all. The Quara, an indigenous nation from what is now Bolivia, have stepped forward to argue that a significant portion of the silver aboard the San José was mined from Cerro Rico, the mountain above the city of Potosi, a mine that, for centuries, ran on the forced labor of indigenous and enslaved people, many of whom died extracting the very silver now sitting on the ocean floor. The Quara argue that this treasure isn't simply Spanish property or Colombian heritage. It is, in part, the literal stolen labor and lives of their ancestors, and they are demanding a voice and a share in whatever happens to it. Suddenly, this isn't just a story about a sunken warship anymore. It's a story about who gets to write history and who gets compensated for the suffering buried underneath all that glittering gold. And this is where the deeper, more uncomfortable layer of this mystery reveals itself. Because when we talk about the richest shipwreck ever found, it's easy to picture glittering coins and emerald necklaces, the stuff of pirate movies and treasure maps. But the wealth aboard the San José didn't come out of nowhere. Every single coin melted down from that Bolivian silver represents labor extracted under horrific conditions. Historians estimate that over the roughly 2.5 centuries the Potosí mines operated under Spanish colonial rule, the death toll among indigenous and enslaved laborers may have reached into the millions through accidents, mercury poisoning during the refining process, and sheer exhaustion in mines that ran non-stop, day and night. The San José wasn't just carrying treasure. In a very real sense, it was carrying evidence, physical, tangible proof of one of the largest and longest-running systems of forced labor in human history, compressed into bars of silver and stacks of coins. That's part of what makes this wreck so different from something like the Titanic, or even other famous treasure ships. This isn't simply a story of nature or misfortune claiming a vessel. This is a story where the treasure itself carries a moral weight, where the riches being fought over in courtrooms today are inseparable from the suffering that produced them centuries ago. And that's exactly why the fight over who owns the San José has become so much bigger than a simple property dispute. It's a fight over historical justice. So why, more than a decade after the wreck was officially rediscovered, has almost none of it been recovered? Part of the answer is purely technical. The San José rests roughly 600 meters below the surface, far too deep for human divers, and deep enough that any recovery operation requires highly specialized robotic submersibles capable of working under crushing pressure in near total darkness with extreme precision. Removing coins, cannons, and ceramics from a fragile, centuries-old wreck without destroying valuable archaeological context is slow, expensive, and technically demanding work. But the bigger obstacle isn't technology, it's the legal deadlock itself. With Colombia, Spain, Sea Search Armada, and the Cara Nation all asserting competing claims, and international courts still working through the case, no single party has the undisputed legal authority to begin large-scale recovery. Colombia has conducted some exploratory dives and released photographs and video, but a full-scale salvage operation remains frozen while the ownership question is fought out in courtrooms on 2 continents. In a strange way, the very thing that makes the San José so valuable, the sheer, staggering size of the fortune involved, is the same thing preventing anyone from touching it. Too many people, too many nations, and too many historical wrongs are tied up in that single wreck for anyone to simply walk away with the gold. And that brings us to the deeper question this whole story keeps circling back to. What does the richest shipwreck ever found actually hide? On the surface, the answer seems obvious. Gold, silver, emeralds, a fortune beyond imagination. But the longer you sit with this story, the more you realize the real answer is something else entirely. The San José hides the true, uncomfortable cost of empire. It hides the bones of 600 men who died in minutes, trapped inside a ship that exploded around them. It hides the forced labor of an entire indigenous population, compressed into bars of silver that funded a war most of those laborers never even knew was happening. And it hides an unanswered question that no court has fully resolved even today. When wealth is built on suffering, who, if anyone, has the right to claim it centuries later? Some archaeologists and historians argue the ship should be treated first and foremost as an underwater gravesite, a place where hundreds of people died, and should be approached with the same respect given to a war memorial rather than a treasure hunt. Others argue the historical and cultural value of what's aboard is simply too important to leave buried forever. That these artifacts belong in museums, where the full, complicated story, the war, the empire, the forced labor, the sinking can finally be told properly to the descendants of everyone the ship touched. There is no easy answer, and maybe that's exactly why this story has held such a grip on people for 3 centuries. The San José isn't just a shipwreck, it's a mirror. It reflects exactly how complicated our relationship with wealth, history, and justice really is. Because the same ocean that swallowed a fortune in gold also swallowed the evidence of everything that fortune truly cost.